Thank you, Roz. And Rob Lalka is a good friend of mine, so this is going to be fun.
It's going to be great. Thanks for being here, Peter. Appreciate it.
Rob, he came here to the business school how many years ago?
7 years.
7 years ago, and he has been just a superstar. He runs the entrepreneurial programs here at the business school, and he has made a huge difference. So I can't wait to talk to him about it. Now, background-wise, you went to Yale, then you were working in Washington for the CIA, I believe.
That's the cover.
Okay. It's supposed to be State Department?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah. That's what we'll say. And and then he worked for Propeller, which is the social entrepreneurship system here, and he just did a great job there. And this is the saddest thing of all. He's a Washington Nationals baseball fan. I just I kind of tear up when I say that. But Rob, let's talk about what the book isn't for a second, because we've seen your op-eds in the Picayune, we've seen you everywhere in the development of businesses here, and that's what a lot of people would think it's going to be, kind of a how-to entrepreneur book, or maybe even a history of some great entrepreneurs. But that's not what it's about. What is it about?
Yeah, when Peter actually got the book and then started looking through it, I think that he was surprised. He's like, wait a second, this isn't what I was expecting. Right. This isn't a how-to. This isn't a sort of, what will entrepreneurs do next sort of book. Because for me, a lot of the conversations I was having with my students were about entrepreneurship, and there was a sense that there was almost like a deification of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And so I started thinking through, how do I get across to them that, these are real human beings that found their way, made mistakes, had some trade-offs, made some moral compromises that maybe you or I would be okay making, maybe not. And so I just started researching and then started writing, and then next thing you know.
And it took a while, because I kept seeing you at College Inn, and you were still working on it every time I ran into you. So
That's true.
It is, I'm going to jump ahead to one of the great, it's such a well-written book, and I got to jump ahead to your sources. Now, Rob is a great researcher. He really is, and I didn't doubt how great the book was going to be. But he went to some pretty unusual places for research, and I think that's the sign of a really great research, going through the normal channels and then going out. And you started reading school newspapers, and usually that just is, suggestions for cheap slices of pizza, but you've kept with it. Why, and what'd you find out?
Yeah, and I think one good sort of conversation starter would be to read some of those, because it's really fascinating. I went through the college newspapers that, in 2004, 2005, 2006, as Facebook was going to those college campuses. And it's interesting because other scholars have gone through and looked at, for instance, depression rates and anxiety rates at those same schools, and found that severe depression went from 7% to 20%, only on the college campuses that were getting Facebook, not the ones where it wasn't there yet. And so you start to see that, or even early on. And so I was wondering, well, how are these students responding to Facebook? And what I found was that they actually weren't just reacting to Facebook, they were also reacting to a site that had come out right at that same time called Catch-27. And Catch-27 was created by a woman who has more recently been in the news, named E. Jean Carroll. And so I'm going to go ahead and read that little bit from the book.
Now that is the woman that's been suing Donald Trump, right?
Right. Yes, so a jury of his peers all came to the unanimous consensus that he had sexually assaulted her in a Bergdorf Goodman store on Fifth Avenue. Yeah. And so as you're listening to this, you have the benefit of hindsight and that fact to wonder, why is she doing this? Why is she doing this when she learns about Mark Zuckerberg and why Catch-27 exists? So let me just begin with that. This is from Chapter 6. The title of the chapter is Trust Us. So let me see, I'll start right here. Mark Zuckerberg bought the URL for thefacebook.com on January 11th, 2004. Word about the website spread so far and so fast that E. Jean Carroll, a writer for Saturday Night Live and author of the popular Ask E. Jean column at Elle, the longest-running advice column in any American magazine, registered a website of her own that July. Catch27.com debuted in November. It was intended as a parody, but Carroll put serious resources behind it. She paid Chantel Farmer, a coder, to create the website. She hired a full-time public relations staffer, a recent Stanford graduate, to field inquiries from college kids and reporters. Once you signed up, which you could only do if you were between the ages of 18 and 27, you began collecting digital cards of faux friends. A pack of 3 cost 99 cents. Was this real? Fake? Did it matter? Had the internet changed all of that? And could you reinvent yourself on Catch-27? Unfazed, Johnson, which was the name, Lindsey Johnson, of the person who was the Stanford grad, played each interview straight with reporters to further the ruse. Quote, "It's like Facebook, except with a wicked twist. And instead of just networking your friends, you trade your friends for hotter, smarter ones." It's kind of an elite, edgy group of hot minds and hot bodies. If they're not, we kick them off the site. Now get this, the more you use the site, the more Catch-27 rewarded you. As the Yale Daily News reported, you would sign up and create a digital persona on Catch-27, just like Facebook. Then your value fluctuated based upon your looks, smarts, number of hot people in your pack, as well as the number of page views you're getting and the number of people buying and trading you. So you might wonder why Catch-27, that's a strange name. And the notion was that it was a Catch-22, but it was even worse than that, and so it was 5 levels up. And E. Jean Carroll actually then makes the joke, plus your life is over with by the time you're 27 anyways. And so we might as well just call it Catch-27, adding that Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin had all died at age 27. And then she added that Usher, who had sold the most records ever at that point, was 27, so he better watch out, basically. So Usher's still with us. So
he is, as far as I know.
Yeah.
That is. And one of the things, you know, we're going to talk a little bit later about, you know, has technology taken us over in terms of more than just what they've invented, but taken over the country and the world. And I had to ask, you know, when they started out so innocent, I mean, like Facebook was just allowing Mark Zuckerberg, as kind of a dweeby guy, to meet girls, right? I mean, that doesn't sound like, it sounds like something I'd sign up for.
Well, I mean, so one of the things is you go through reading these student newspapers, and you start to realize, like, this was weird from the beginning in ways that we look back on, and like there was the poke feature, okay? Like, what an awkward way to get someone's attention. Like, that's really creepy. There's, you know, you could list whether you were in a relationship or not, but then people were voicing concerns saying, like, doesn't anyone think it's odd that it says, you know, in a relationship, single, or anything I can get?
Yes,
I mean,
this is 3 is terrible.
Yeah, right. And so you have these students that are responding to it. And what's amazing is that E. Jean Carroll is like, continues this joke over and over again every time you read it in the paper, including when they talk about the algorithm. And so they ask about the algorithm and say, like, well, how do you decide who's worth more? And the reply was, the voting is subjective, objective, and everything in between. And so there's this really great, like, we're not going to tell you what the algorithm's doing here, which Facebook, of course, never does. But what's amazing, too, is that with these 99-cent cards, this is before Facebook has a business model. You could argue these digital assets were an early version of the first non-fungible tokens, the first NFTs, which becomes a multi-billion-dollar market until, of course, it crashes. And so when you think about like what's going on here, she's way ahead of her time, right? And she even had websites before this, which she actually, there were dating websites, greatboyfriends.com, greatgirlfriends.com, where she would, basically you would sign up for it and then people would vouch for you who had dated you before to say, this isn't exactly the guy I ended up with, the girl I wanted, but like, I would vouch for them. It's funny, but there's this sort of good intentions behind creating safeguards around the internet that when we think about it, well, one, we're talking about that now with AI, and so it's interesting to think about what didn't happen before and where we are now. But two, I've already told you what happened to E. Jean Carroll. Why was she doing this? Okay? Why was she creating sites where you would validate whether someone was going to be decent or might sexually assault somebody? Right? Why was she concerned about the poke feature or concerned about these other stalkerish behaviors on Facebook? Why was she concerned about the way that, especially on these social media sites, people were more engaged in materialism and judgment? And the argument I make in here is that if you look all the way back of what Facebook's origin story is, folks, it's judgment as entertainment. That's what it is. It's still judgment as entertainment. It's still what it is. And so I think it's important for us, frankly, to look at the humor and be like, wow, I wish more people wouldn't have just laughed, but also seen that the humor was funny because there was truth. And we should have paid more attention to the truth underneath it.
And Rob, when the internet came out, we didn't know what to make of it. We hadn't really seen that kind of power. Is it similar to what we're seeing in AI? Because really none of us know where that could go.
Yeah, so I end the book by actually going back and interviewing the people who were talking about the risks in the college newspapers. I find them and email them and say, hey, do you remember saying this? And almost to a person, they're like, vaguely? like maybe, I don't know, right? Like, that would have been something I would have said is what I got a lot back. And so like one of those quotes though, which is just phenomenal, was a woman named Melissa Patty, P-A-T-T-I. She ends up working for the March of Dimes, and so she works on women's health issues at March of Dimes, and she has this really beautiful story. It'd be familiar to any of us here in New Orleans, where it's not just her family that's helping to raise her kids, but it really is all of her friends who are part of a community, and she talks about how much that matters, right? That literally that's where she's finding the most meaningful stuff in her life, not what's online, but in community with real people who, are a part of her life. And this is what she was saying 20 years ago, that, and about Catch-27, not Facebook, so keep this in mind. It kind of decreases the work that women have created in the past to be looked at as equals in society's eyes. That she was worried about things like eating disorders. She goes, that rejection based upon appearance and on society's standards of beauty encourages problems like eating disorders because, in her words, it goes back to everything in culture that tells women that their only value is them as sex objects. And it's not just Melissa Patty. There's actually a really incredible Boston Globe article with a student that says, E. Jean Carroll is either, quote, really desperate for friends or is laughing all the way to the bank. But then goes on to say, it's not that we don't know that this compulsive behavior is unhealthy. It's just another one of those guilty pleasures you know is bad for you, but you don't care enough about to stop doing. And I think about that with all of our screen time right now. And so it really is profound that it's not that we didn't see it coming, it's that we did, and we did it anyways.
In fact, the title alone, you say big tech and profits, and we would think that there's connection. I mean, it's a capitalistic country. But the next two words are "and power." Mm-hmm. What do you mean there? I guess we're starting to figure it out. But
yeah. So the sort of structure of the book is around three different acts. The first act is silicon. It talks about how these companies are able to grow as fast as they do because of technology. The second is gold, which refers to, of course, the wealth that's created. And the third is power. And when you think about the power they've gained, it's not just, of course, that they're some of the largest companies that have ever existed. I mean, these are the success stories of capitalism. But it's also that we are spending so much of our time and our attention for free. And we may think, well, we get all of this for free, so it's actually, we're getting the best end of that deal. But I think what we fail to understand in the digital age is that our time is valuable, our data is extremely valuable. And if we understood that more fully, then we would, instead of looking at this as, well, we're getting something for free, you're actually giving up a lot of agency, a lot of privacy, It's called surveillance capitalism. Shoshana Zuboff has talked about that. And when you think about the trade-offs that you make without even knowing it, you may not be as comfortable with the sort of world that we are in now and where the internet has turned out. And if you're not okay with that, then I think the next question is, well, do you trust these technologists to then move forward with extremely powerful artificial intelligence or extremely powerful tools like CRISPR, gene editing? I mean, these are very, very powerful next steps that I think we all need to sort of be paying more attention to, because frankly, we were paying attention, at least these students were, as these technologies were rolling out, and yet they've created a world where these technologies are extremely addicting. And they do lead to depression, and they do lead to just some really, and I wouldn't even say bad unintended consequences. That was the point. Like, they wanted us to be addicted to our phones as we scroll through those feeds, because the dopamine was what we would need. And so, you know, I think that those are really important considerations for us to take into account right now. And again, that's the reason why I wrote the book, was for my students, some of whom are here today, and thank you for being here, and for my sons, is because I don't necessarily think that we're on the right track.
And, you know, the regulations are kind of for technology. First of all, the regulators are always 2 steps behind and trying to keep up. But also, it just seems like the people who are, say, in Congress are as clueless. They're even more clueless than me. That's what I'm getting at. I mean, they're old white guys that are 70s and 80s, right? I mean, is that any hope for us?
I mean, I believe in democracy. I don't necessarily believe in the people we've elected right now, but I do believe in democracy, would be my answer to that. And so, I mean, I think that the solution is actually among us, right here in this room, and then whomever else decides they want to pick up this book, and then to join the conversation. I don't think that it is in the current people who just clearly don't get it or don't have the courage to do anything about it if they do get it. Because they would rather, I mean, you look at just this week, they'd rather point the finger at TikTok as if that's the whole problem. And that's easy because it's China, and so you can, it's a scaremongering, right? But that's not going to address any of these sort of underlying issues that are really important about society. One of the quotes I want to make sure to read is Sean Parker, who was the original CEO of Facebook. He founded a company called Napster that I get into, and then he was the first CEO of Facebook. He told Mike Allen this, and it's just really incredible. I want everyone to sort of listen to these words, because this is somebody who is telling the truth. He's giving what I call in the book a confession. And I think it's important for us to listen to. He says, quote, "The thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them, was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you more likes and comments." But here's the thing, is that Parker realized what he was doing. He says, quote, "It's not that we don't know that this compulsive behavior is unhealthy. It's just," and then he says, actually, I was quoting from that earlier quote. Parker then says, it's a social validation feedback loop. That's his quote. "Exactly the kind of thing," listen to this, "that a hacker like myself would have come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology." I say, if they'd actually hacked our brains, it amazed them just how much we loved it. We seem to value representations more than real life. We weren't just hacked, we were hooked. Parker went on for several minutes in response to this single question. It was a full-on admission that our obsession with social media and our addiction to our devices more generally had been planned. He fretted about, quote, "the unintended consequences of a network when it grows to 1 billion or 2 billion people, and it literally changes your relationship with society, with each other. It probably interferes with productivity in weird ways." And then this was his final confession. Quote, "God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains."
You know, Rob, I know you as a kind of a fun guy. We're friends, and yet and I'm a little concerned, but But turning that around a little bit, is there something we can do as individuals? I mean, it's kind of a sad story, and we're not ending on that. Don't worry. But it's. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this book is. The humor in it is dark. Let's be clear, but there's lots of humor in here, right? Like, I mean, if you can't laugh along the way towards like the dangers, like you're in deep trouble if you're not able to at least laugh. But it's also very hopeful at the end. That's what I would say. I've been telling people as they ask with that sort of, wait a second, Rob, you okay? Like, you good, Rob? You're all right? Like, this is what you've been delving into for the last several years. You're all right? You know, is like if you don't read the epilogue, you might come away with the conclusion that this book is like it's a fait accompli, that we don't have any choices, and that's the exact opposite, folks. Like, we're in a democracy that, as of today at least, is still functioning, and so we have plenty of choices. And what I argue in the epilogue, please do buy and read the book. I'm not trying to just give it away. But what I argue is that, like, we make choices every day. All of us do. And in an era where your time and your attention and your data are so valuable, the smallest little choices can actually be acts of purposeful purpose. Like, you can literally say, I'm on purpose going to do this thing for a purpose. And even civil disobedience. Like, if you disagree with these multi-trillion-dollar companies being the things that are controlling what you see, and even the way that your brain starts to understand and what you start to think, if you disagree with that, it's up to you to then put it down. And I very much try and shed light, not heat. That's the main sort of maxim for me. So even when I see things that just like make my skin crawl, I try and do it without judgment, but with curiosity. And I hope that's the tone that I conveyed as the narrator was inviting people in, encouraging them to make their own mind up about how that makes them feel. But at the end, I did take the sort of author's privilege to say, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, there are plenty of people who have all along been telling us things that are quite inspiring and have a really interesting perspective on this. And I've been listening to them, and those folks see a very different future for what the internet could be, for what society can be, even what our politics can be, folks. And I think especially with it being an election year, that's something that's needed.
You know, not to make fun of politicians on all these issues, but I remember the late Governor Ann Richards in Texas. She had a friend come visit and take her to dinner, and she said, oh, it was old college friend. She goes, I can't, I'm busy for about 2 hours. Why don't you go down and watch the legislature? And that'll kind of, you know, keep you busy for a while and then come out back. And so the old friend comes back 2 hours later, and she goes, Ann, those people are morons. And Ann says, yes, but if they weren't, they would not be a representative body. And so this is sort of how we're going. The big issue up at the Capitol, of course, is whether or not these companies that we're talking about should be broken up. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you think?
So every time that our legislators have tried to get ahead of tech's already 4 steps ahead, right? And by being ahead, it's not only being smarter and understanding the laws and understanding the implications more and having a lobbyist and all of that. It's not just that, folks. I mean, it's the fact that, as you'll read in here, they're funding campaigns in an incredible way. So you look at, for instance, what Uber has done with Prop 22 in California. It was over $200 million that they put behind a campaign to literally change people's minds about
what was that, by the way?
Yeah, so there was the legislator had passed an act to basically make it so that Uber had to pay people as full-time employees, giving them all the requisite benefits, including health benefits, you know, all of the benefits you would get as a W-2, not as a 1099. And the polling was completely going against Uber and Lyft and these other companies. And not only did they put over $200 million, which is more than anyone has put behind any campaign ever, they also used our devices to prompt us to vote in the way that they were wanting us to. So every time you loaded an Uber app, it gave you information that swayed you. So it's a marketing tool that also then became a political tool. And you see the votes. You see the votes switch. So you have polling that goes one way that then you see over time as that money gets to work, it changes the outcome. And what's interesting about that is that, I mean, they were doing old political tricks, paying the NAACP head to represent them so that they could say that it was, that ride sharing was anti-racist. I mean, really profoundly disturbing things. Running a ballot where you have every Democratic candidate, and then the Democratic Party was against Uber on this one, and then it had the opposite of that for this particular ballot initiative, and they handed that out in Democratic districts. I mean, they were doing these things that were pretty profoundly disturbing and deceptive. But the sheer money is the thing we should pay attention to here, folks. Like the fact that they were willing to put that kind of money behind a campaign like this is wild. And one of the points I make is I tally it up and I talk about the number of lobbyists that Uber in particular has paid so that they don't have to pay drivers. And I think that that's an interesting juxtaposition.
You know, I think a lot of people, and I'm pretty guilty of this too, they don't understand how widespread these companies are. Like, you know, for me, Amazon is those nice folks that, you know, bring me, bring me shoes I ordered or something. But that's not really who they are or where they make their profit, right?
Yeah, yeah, and this is another deception. Uber in particular is telling people, especially the drivers, that you are small business owners. They even use the word entrepreneurs, okay? But if you look at who is actually benefiting, who has not only the power but the wealth here, you look at Uber's corporate structure, yeah, the driver may get the most of each individual ride, but on volume, its CEO makes 1,000 times more than the drivers do on average per year. And so, you know, that discrepancy, even he has admitted, is not right. And so you look at that. You also look at the fact that you look at Uber's cap table, so this is who owns Uber, if you look at the number of shares, there are about 3 million shares that are owned by Uber's board of directors, by their CEO, by others that are sort of the American folks that are involved. There are over 72 million shares that are owned by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, by the Saudi PIF. And so we can get upset about the Live Golf merger, but no one's gotten upset about that.
That is true. Can I ask you a question that's off the book? Because I know a lot of you came here because this is the man for entrepreneurship.
They came here for Peter Ricchiuti, let's be clear.
Oh, yeah, that's just arm candy. But it's, yeah. But, you know, a lot of people have always wanted to kind of get to see you and ask a question. And one of the things that I just wanted to bring up is that in terms of New Orleans is a very difficult place to get a company to move to. We have parishes instead of counties. We've got Napoleonic law. You know, we're below sea level. Our rats are eating our evidence. We got a lot of issues. And,
that's one word for it, Peter.
So it's a tough sell. Do you think that entrepreneurship is the hope here? I mean, we have one Fortune 500 company in the whole state. Is it entrepreneurship that's going to change it? And what can people or government do to help make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that I try and teach my students is that if there's anything you don't like about the world, like anything, whether it's the stuff that's in this book or anything, then changing that can be something that could literally be done in one lifetime by somebody on a mission to create a great company, to build something that's a better alternative. And so if you don't like Facebook, now Meta, or Google, now Alphabet, and you don't like Uber or Lyft, the way that they've handled things, great, build something. And so I do think that New Orleans is contrarian enough, creative enough, and frankly, a little bit of the attitude of like, you don't have it all figured out to others, right? That's a little bit of who we are, that absolutely we can build great companies here, and I think why not? I mean, it's one of the things that I really, as a teacher, is my favorite thing, is to watch a student as the light bulbs go off about some of these realities, and then for them to realize these aren't startups anymore, they are the corporate behemoths, and they're gonna get disrupted in your lifetimes, and you could be the ones to do it. You know, you literally, my students who are here, you could be the ones to do it. And why not? Because Mark Zuckerberg is my age, and he quit school to go off and do it, and built this thing. And my point is, I'd rather you stay in school, and we'll surround you with great resources, right?
Yeah.
And build it here, because there are a lot of people who will want to do something different. And actually, I would say this: everything I've described is about consolidating power. It's about restricting people from knowing the truth. It's about really trying to do things in an oligarchical or even dictatorial way. Like, that ain't us, y'all. Like, we are a community, we care about each other, we look out for each other, and I think that's why we win. Like, I think if this can change, that's why New Orleans could be a place where this starts to change, is that, New Orleans is a place that is, small d, democratic. Like, we actually do care about each other. We are in community. And so when you get to the epilogue and the people who are inspiring that next vision of what's possible, like, it will feel very familiar for New Orleanians because it's who we are.
So you're telling me that lobbyists can influence politicians? Okay, and what's the other part I had is and not everything on the internet is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all those things.
If there's anybody here with the media, I would like that to come across. This is the time where we're going to ask you to ask questions, because I can tell by some of the nodding and head shaking, and once again, no, can't throw anything, right? Can't, no,
please don't.
But if you have something civil to say, please go to the mic. Where is the? Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. Want to stand up?
All right.
Go to the mic. Thank you.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Vanita Mahanti, and I just had a question. So I've noticed that on social media, a lot of people in my generation have been bombarded with a lot of pessimistic information at such a high magnitude that they've become desensitized and really uninterested in political participation. And I know y'all mentioned that we elect the politicians who have the power to create regulations, but how are we supposed to make positive change within a generation that seems, I guess, complacent and generally uninterested with making change?
That's a profound question. Let me just give you one quick story about why we've ended up here, okay? And then maybe a little bit of hopefulness. So in January of 2012, Facebook ran a study on all of its users. Some of you may be in this room, because there were 689,003 people that they ran a study to see if they gave you more positive information, how you'd respond, and if they gave you more negative information, how you'd respond. It worked exactly like you would think, okay? So nobody had signed up for this study other than signing up for the terms of service agreement that nobody ever reads, right? And so they literally ran this for 2 weeks in January, and it worked just like you'd expect. The people who got happier content started posting more happy stuff. The people who started getting more negative content, more negative stuff, or they could tell from the emotional tenor of the words. But here's the most interesting thing. They learned that the people who posted the most stuff were the people who were getting extremes on either end. So they learned this. They learned that extreme content would keep you engaged. And so it's fully documented from the Francis Hogan leaks that Mark Zuckerberg made the choice to then fill our algorithm, our feeds, through the algorithm with more negative and especially more negative and more positive, but especially more emotionally laden content. So yeah, that's what you know that you are going to be dealing with when you are then flicking through your phone. And so I think to answer your question directly, spend more time without staring at your phones, actually having real conversations. Educate yourself on what this means in terms of especially this election season. And then do all the great things in a democracy that aren't about being digital, that are about knocking on doors and sitting down in town halls and all the good stuff that makes our democracy great.
That's a very good question. Somebody coming up there? There we go.
Hello, my name is Kiana Patel, and as both of your students, I know the importance of being critical and not cynical. With that in mind, we see information dissemination shifting towards large language models. You have Google's Gemini, which just went through a really big problem, but that had a lot of visibility, and they had to act on it really fast. Do you think that in this new era of large language models, and with AI having a much greater ability to be audited and regulated and shifted, that actually there'll be a positive shift towards positive biases in technology development?
I think there's an opportunity to. I don't know if it will. And so, like, what is a large language model? It's a bunch of information that is a pool of data that these very powerful machines learn on, okay? They're learning on what we've taught the internet thus far, okay? What have we taught the internet thus far? That we're obsessed with superficiality, with likes and with clicks, and that we're consumers. Like, that's not humanity. That's not the best of us, right? But that's literally what most of the internet knows right now. I think before we move forward with trusting that these large language models represent us fully, we should at least slow down and think about what that could mean. The other thing I would say is that these large companies are asking for regulation. They're asking for policy guidelines. They're asking for that. There's a reason, because they literally debate P-doom, the probability of doom. Okay, this is literally the debate that they have in Silicon Valley is, what's your P-doom score? Like, what's your likelihood that extremely powerful AI will destroy the world? Like, the fact that they're even concerned about that should give us all concern, right? And so, I would just say, like, one of the things that people didn't ask often enough, who were building these things, was, should I? They asked, could I, right? And so I think that one of the things we should ask is, should I? And then the follow-on is almost always going to be, how should I? Because if we, in America, where we actually do believe in free expression, free speech, like freedom of all people, equal rights, all of those great values, if we don't do it, they will in China, they will in Russia. These other places are also going to gain access to these tools. So we shouldn't be naive to think we should just pause. But I think we should be proactive in thinking, how do we do this in a way that represents our very best, and not just the consumerism and the sort of superficiality that I mentioned earlier. Thank you for asking that question.
Good question. See, they're lined up, Rob.
Uh-huh.
I tell you, doing good.
Thank you for speaking. My name is William. I'm a senior at Tulane, and I come from Silicon Valley, so I've seen, like, just as I was growing up, all this tech development and et cetera. And I noticed in the last year or so, Tulane and Louisiana as a whole has been pushing, like, innovation, entrepreneurship. We have these, like, a whole bunch more pitch competitions than when I was a freshman and a sophomore. And part of me is a little bit concerned that, like, of the efficacy of this. I've realized a lot of companies have tried to move away from Silicon Valley, but they just cannot bring the engineers, because the engineers are going to stay in Silicon Valley. And if the company moves, they're just going to move to another company in the valley. So I guess, I wanted to know your thoughts on how New Orleans and just in general, like the rest of the United States, can kind of break that grip that Silicon Valley has on technical talents.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, I always tell my students that if you want to, like, all you care about is making money, right, then you can go work at Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or any of the investment banks, or McKinsey or any of the consulting firms, or now in that same ilk, I would say, Meta or any of these large companies, Alphabet, you'll make good money. When you think about, you only get to go around once, and why are we here on this earth, it's not about making money. None of us would say that that's only the point of life, right? And so why not build something that's going to be awesome, that changes things in a way that drives your purpose? And why not do that in a way that other people want to join you and consumers are attracted to? Because that's also how you make wealth, by the way. You'll make more than just money. You could make incredible riches if you build a great company that takes on one of these others and becomes a great alternative. So the answer to that is, like, New Orleans is a great place to do that, because we'll be supportive of that. We will actually be here to help you to build something tremendous. And folks, one thing I think should be hopefully giving you a little bit of moment of hope at the end of this is that I'm not the only one saying this stuff. There's a book by a guy named Frank McCourt that just came out this week, okay, called Our Biggest Fight. I was reading it last night because it just came in this week. Like, he makes a lot of these similar arguments, and I was fortunate. Tamika Tillman, who is running Project Liberty, which McCourt has funded. McCourt's a billionaire. It's not Rob Lalka. This is a billionaire saying this stuff. Like, it's like Tamika's blurred my book because he's like, this is, people need to know these stories. We need to know where this is going. And so, I mean, my hope is that, you know, come hang out with us at the LePage Center. We'll do all we can to help you build one of these companies.
Good point. Yeah. Talk about not just caring about profits. There was a quote from John D. Rockefeller, and they asked him, how much money is enough money? And he said, a little more. So there was something, but I like what Rob's saying. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Rob. I'm here to hear about your book, and you've caught me off guard with some of the points. So I've pre-ordered 12 of them, and I'm just wondering if I should tell all the people I give them to read the epilogue first, because it sounds like that should be the plug.
Richard, I actually begin, thank you for that. Actually, thanks for buying a dozen copies, Richard. This is a perfect segue. I have little stickers that I can sign so that make sure that everyone gets a signed copy. And so I'm happy to go. I'll go over to the tent and sign those for everybody. Starting with Richard with 12 of them, thank you. But yeah, actually, I begin the book with the acknowledgments. And I'm really grateful that a lot of the people who I mentioned the acknowledgments are actually in this room today to hear about this book for the first time. And so thank you all for being supportive. You didn't even know that, right? And so thank you for being supportive of me all throughout. But in the acknowledgments, I talk about, I actually begin it with this great line. There's this line that begins Moby Dick, which is, call me Ishmael. And anybody who understands thinking through great American novels, there's the sense of like, what an interesting phrase. It's not I am Ishmael. It's not my name is Ishmael. It's call me Ishmael. And so I purposely began my book with call me ordinary, with ordinary in quotes, because, I mean, yeah, this is my first book. I don't have any reason to be making any of these arguments against any of these Silicon Valley titans. They have no reason to pay attention to me. But if the book's good enough, then maybe other people do. And so that's my hope. And I begin with a sense of the real American success story that even makes it possible for me to be up here today. That this is a great country, and I'm really grateful for all the people who've helped me along the way. And so don't worry, Richard, it's a beginning and end are both pretty optimistic.
Rob, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.